This is the Dreadbox Nyx version 2. I am lucky to have this. I think it's one of 3 in the United States, so I've got it for a very short time, so I'm going to have to really focus more than I typically do. And yes, I hear the person who's out there like, Dodie can talk for 10 minutes about a square wave. So I'm not going to be talking for 10 minutes about this square wave, so you'll be really happy about that. Anyway, here we have the Dreadbox Nyx version 2. It's expanded, has expanded modularity, expanded reverb. It's really a function-filled and great-sounding synthesizer. Let us dig in because the clock is ticking. Okay, we're going to focus first on the oscillator section. I currently have Oscillator 2 audible. You can see in the mixer I have Oscillator 2 turned all the way up. It's also set to a sawtooth, and it's in the middle of its octave range. Let's have a listen. Okay, and of course we can adjust the octaves or go all the way down. Those are the 3 octaves we have functional here on the Nyx itself. Of course, this is a tabletop synth, so I'm actually activating it with a different controller, which always feels weird to me as a keyboard demonstrator. I feel like somehow I'm cheating. But yes, there's a key step down here that I am using. I have it right now set 1 octave down. Of course, we could take it even further down into the clicks if we want to. Or of course we can go a lot higher. Interesting sounds there. Okay, but yes, roughly you have 3 octave range here. So that is our sawtooth wave. Let us have a listen to this square wave. It has a huge low end, so that's great for your square wave. Also, in addition to the octave settings we've just demonstrated, you also have control over a fine tune of the pitch. Which has an octave in each direction. And it has its own independent glide. Let's hear how long we can get it to go. I'd imagine if you had a keyboard with more than just a couple of octaves, you could probably get that to be a bit longer. One of the things I love about this is when you switch octaves, you can hear the Portamento switch as well. I'm not sure why I love that, but it's somehow pleasing to me. But yes, this synthesizer has independent glide control for each of the oscillators, which is a thing I absolutely love because if you can get different glide lengths for a sound, you have the opportunity to get sort of chorusing effects as the frequencies are lagged by the glide. Meaning that they have different relationships as far as frequency as they are moving towards their target frequency. I first discovered it on actually a Korg monopoly because there was something wrong with it, and its Portamento was affecting each oscillator differently, but it's a really beautiful sound. I absolutely love it. Okay, so Oscillator 2, you might think, is exactly like Oscillator 1, and that's not entirely true. Oscillator 2 also has a sawtooth. But instead of a square wave, it has a triangle wave. So let's have a listen to that. Of course, with triangle wave, you're also going to have a big low end. Actually, you're going to hear the low end more so because there's less other frequencies to mess with it. As triangles go, this triangle has a lot of sizzle on top, which is a lot of fun because then the filter is more likely to evoke some changes in it. A lot of triangle waves on synthesizers don't have a lot of high frequencies, and therefore when the filter is being used, you don't really hear the filter affecting it all that much because it's just dealing with a few frequencies on the top. Okay, so then of course you can use these two oscillators together. Making sure first, of course, to have them in tune. A little detuning there. We could listen to that glide thing I was talking about. Or one can have glide and one cannot. And of course, we could set them to different octaves, which they have been actually. Some really great timbres there. I am really enjoying that. But yeah, with as is typical, since you have 3 different octaves to choose from and 2 different waveforms per oscillator, you can come up with a variety of timbres right off the bat without involving the filter. And of course, you can use the mixer to decide which oscillator gets prominence. And vice versa. Allowing you to do more subtle sort of manipulations. And Oscillator 2, obviously, well, not obviously, I'm just going to tell you that the tuning also has 2 octaves. So if you want to have some intervals and do what I typically describe as the prog outcome, using that triangle gives you kind of an organ sound. Of course, you should never ever use a synthesizer to pretend to make an organ. I I say things like that because I want to see someone complain about it in the comments. I'm sorry. But yeah, you can do an organ sound. Organ, not Oregon. You can't do an organ sound on the synthesizer. But yes. I'm doing intervals there, so it sounds like two notes are playing at a time. Well, interestingly, you can do two notes at a time. Currently, this synthesizer is Duophonic. And let's have a refresher course because there's a lot of confusion about this, and I am weirdly religious about the use of these terms. Duophonic means two notes play at a time. The term doesn't address voices, so you don't kind of have to get into paraphonic, which is a different thing. That's how voices are articulated. This is Duophonic. It plays two notes at the same time. Of course, it also has low note priority, so if you're going to hold a note, you should probably hold the lower note. So that's cool. Okay, let's talk about more stuff. This has sync. So let's have a little tiny refresher course on this. Sync is when one oscillator is forced to restart its waveforms every time the other oscillator restarts its waveforms, which doesn't typically generate a huge difference unless you start to mess with the pitch of the oscillator that's being forced to align with the other oscillator's waveforms, as we'll demonstrate here. There is a change in timbre, but it still kind of sounds sawtoothy. The fun starts when we start to mess with the frequency of the oscillator that is being synced. It's a nice sync sound. Sometimes the differences are more overt. We already have it. No wonder they're overt because we're already in the higher octave. Less overt in the same octave. And not noticeable at all in the lowest octave. But when we have the synced oscillator in a high octave and the target oscillator in a low octave, that difference in frequency is forcing this poor oscillator to restart in inhumane and cruel ways. We should ban syncing because really it's oscillator torture. But I'll show you something cool. Since this is a duophonic synth, the change of frequency can happen with the second oscillator even if it isn't currently independent. So you can hold a note with oscillator 1 and then you can mess with the frequency of oscillator 2 generating sync effects. Which is kind of fun. Also, if we want to break my pattern here and just take the LFO and control the frequency of oscillator 2, we can generate, just a typical sync effect. So, yes, and I want to point out, without belaboring the point, it's not just these functions, but the Nyx sounds great doing these functions. It just has a great sound to it. And I really like Dreadbox because I think they are aimed at not just having a function, but choosing a version of a function that is aurally pleasing. So it results in being a sweet spot sort of synthesizer, and that's certainly true of this. I love that I had the oscillators totally out of tune while I'm talking about what a sweet spot synthesizer this is. All right, so that is the oscillator section of the Nyx. Next, oh man, that's terrible. I'm so sorry. We're going to be talking about routing and the dual filter section.